Trigun, one of the classics of Toonami and Adult Swim's golden age. Famous for stylish, kick-ass gunfights, for the English dub that kicked off Johnny Young Bosch's voice acting career, and for its unique tone that somehow managed to successfully transform from a charming, happy-go-lucky action comedy into a darker, more complex, and philosophically challenging action drama. And probably known best of all for its hero, the tirelessly compassionate, steadfastly pacifistic, yet inarguably badass gunman of godly precision. The most selfless, hilarious, and lovable man ever to have an 11-figure bounty on his head. The humanoid typhoon himself, Vash the Stampede. Aside from design tweaks and how much more generally lively and funny he is in the '98 version, Vash's characterization is among the least changed in Trigun Stampede, I think. Which was a smart call, as no matter how differently you might choose to approach the rest of the material, Vash and his staunch beliefs about mercy, love, and peace in the face of a harsh world that rarely shares those values is the beating heart of what really makes Trigun such a beloved favorite even after all these years. It's certainly still one of my all-time favorite anime, and today I'm going to count down the particular episodes that have stuck with me most. Naturally, since this is a 26-episode series with only like one or two I might skip over whenever I rewatch, there will be plenty of good episodes that won't quite make my personal top 10, so feel free to give those some love in the comments, especially if they're favorites of yours. Now, in celebration of this modern anime classic's 25th anniversary, these are my top 10 favorite episodes of Trigun. Number 10. Episode 3, Peacemaker. Before Legato and the Gung-Ho Guns came around, bringing a darker tone and a more concrete storyline with them, the earlier chunk of the series was fairly episodic, with Vash and the insurance girls encountering various different people and places that raise interesting issues to talk about, and provide great fodder for us to gradually get to know Vash and what his deal is little by little in each story. His characterization in these early episodes is particularly fun in how every time he tackles problems in his uniquely Vash way, we're never 100% sure just how genuinely hapless he is and how much he's actually playing the fool, allowing everybody to underestimate him while he is in fact way more perceptive, wise, and in control of situations than any normal person would ever expect. This episode marks the first time we really get hints at how much more serious and worldly he is under the goofball exterior. When Vash travels to a town home to Frank Marlin, a famously skilled gunsmith, he befriends the town drunk, rather begrudgingly at first.
No. Hey, don't be shy. Hey, we're pals, aren't we?
But I don't even know you!
How about a little make-up kiss, brother?
And soon pieces together that said drunk and the legendary gunsmith are the same guy. Turns out he gave up his craft and turned to the bottle after his family was tragically killed by robbers wielding guns that he himself made, ironically for the purpose of keeping his town safe. There's some nice subtlety in how the two of them talk. Marlin laying out his philosophy about how doing nothing is the only fair way to live, and to guarantee one's actions never inadvertently cause more harm than good like his ones did. And Vash wordlessly conveys a lot of understanding and contemplation of the guy's story, even after getting good and schnockered with him. In my opinion, this is probably the best of these really early done-in-one episodes. About a broken man eventually learning from Vash's example that choosing not to act is still making a choice, and one that doesn't make situations any more or less fair, but choosing to act always at least has a chance of changing unfair situations for the better, like how standing up for others against a gang of bullies can help inspire them to stand up for themselves. Peacemaker has plenty of laughs, a simple yet mature story, and it treats us to Vash wearing a trash can lid as a cowboy hat, and somehow managing to make it look genuinely cool. You've just gotta love that. Number 9. Episode 11, Escape from Pain. From what I can tell, this one isn't one of the most popular favorites. As far as episodes co-starring Nicholas Wolfe would go, a lot more fans would probably pick Murder Machine or Quick Draw over this one. but I don't know, it just stands out in ways that I've always really enjoyed. It's the closest Millie has ever gotten to her own focus episode, and it's here where her budding relationship with Wolfwood is easily at its funniest and most adorable.
Hey.
Secondhand smoke is bad for the baby, darling.
Oh, yeah, gee, sorry about that, honey.
The two of them get caught in the middle of a young couple who are trying to elope, and the caravan that depends on the young man as a key of sorts to a neighboring commerce city where they do business, including deplorable businesses like human trafficking, which is another reason why these two are so insistent on running away and starting a new life together. However, while Wolfwood is just as capable of wide-eyed sentimentality and romanticism as Vash, or Millie in this case, he's also the Spock-like voice of pragmatism and the needs of the many at times like this. He reminds the couple that by running away, they're abandoning the people in the caravan to die without their key to the city and their continued livelihood. Uncondonable as the practices of the people running it may be, does everyone in the caravan really deserve that, and could these two really live with themselves if they do go through with it? Meanwhile, the caravan owner happens to hire Vash to hunt down and stop the two runaways by any means necessary. And with how unusually steely and super serial Vash is suddenly acting in this episode, we're led to wonder if he might actually go that far this time. Other episodes certainly feature more action, but the moral dilemma in this one is pretty compelling, as is the nice character development it provides for Wolfwood, Millie, and even Vash and Meryl. Just a little bit for the latter two, but fans know this series kinda has a knack for making a little go far. For a story that focused so little on him, the part Vash ultimately plays in it is pretty well done and memorable, his seemingly out-of-character behavior turning out to be for purposes that make perfect sense for him. The episode gives us some interesting insight into what kind of person Wolfwood is at heart when his principles are tested, by someone other than Vash this time, and how much he will ultimately stick his neck out for someone he truly cares about, even when he disagrees with the decision they're making, especially when they're as innocent and earnest about it as Millie. Personally, I think Escape from Pain is a pretty underrated episode. Number 8. Episode 26, Under the Sky So Blue. The grand finale in which our hero has his standoff with the mastermind behind all the suffering of innocent people, the deaths of good friends, and the overall meat grinder of emotional turmoil Vash has been put through ever since episode 12, and in fact since the day humanity landed on this planet. That mastermind being his own brother, Million's Knives. I think in theory it was a fair choice for Stampede to just introduce Knives as the main antagonist right away in its version of events, as some have pointed to how the original anime didn't get very deep into his and Vash's history together until the end as a problem, and a reason why for some viewers this finale felt rushed and the final villain of the story felt underdeveloped, or developed in a too little too late way. And to each their own. The very last episode does spend literally the entire first half of its runtime filling in the rest of the brothers' backstory that we didn't get in episode 17, the only other episode where Knives had a sizable amount of screen time. But personally, I think the less is more approach to Knives really worked here. We knew exactly as much as we needed to know who Knives was and what he was capable of exactly when we needed to know it for the purposes any given moment of the storyline was going for. I don't think they crammed all this backstory into the finale because of any sort of oversight in the storytelling, but because holding off on it until now allowed Knives to be this enigmatic figure from Vash's past that could be intriguing, or terrifying, or eye-opening right where it needed to be. Episode 17 and a few other choice moments up to this point had provided just enough details about the history of the brothers, their different outlooks, and their century-spanning feud, and details like their actual relationship during their years together after the seed ship incident, or the origins of the twin angel arm guns, arguably weren't absolutely essential information until now. Where the brothers have their physical and ideological confrontation, there is no more need for mystery, and the dramatic focus finally needs to feel more personal. That confrontation itself is pretty damn cool, fast-paced, and tense. Vash has faced challenging opponents before, even ones with powerful enhanced abilities, but this is the legendary gunman up against his true equal, with all the same superhuman reflexes, intelligence, and power he possesses. They're constantly anticipating each other's tricks and matching each other's moves like literally nobody else on the planet can, culminating in a final resolution that, again, some find underwhelming, and I did too at first, but every time I rewatch it grows on me more and more. I think the ending is very in character, not just for Vash and his personal growth, but for how optimistic the show ultimately is even at its darkest, leaving us and the characters we've grown to love on a fitting note that the future is indeed always open. It's a good episode and a good conclusion in my book, but as you can see from its place on this list, there are several other episodes I like even more. Number 7. Episode 7, BDN, and Episode 8, and Between the Wasteland and Sky. Yeah, Trigun doesn't have any episodes officially designated as two-parters in the titles, but certain pairs like this really might as well be, so I'm treating them as such. While Vash is riding aboard a sand steamer, the most reliable means of long-distance travel on this desert planet, he's caught up in this neo-Western world's equivalent of an old-fashioned train robbery, led by easily one of the most memorable non-gung-ho gun villains in the series, the ruthless, ever-stylish, brilliant dynamite Neon. In the lead-up to the actual hijacking, Vash befriends a scrappy boy named Kite, who he thinks is just a poor runaway, but is actually working for Neon to infiltrate the sand steamer and give his gang the opening they need to storm it. While the kid takes advantage of Vash's kindness and gullibility in order to do his job, we soon learn that he's really not that bad. Kite is an orphan who's been browbeaten into working for the robbers because of his knowledge of the sand steamer, being the son of its designer. When it becomes clear that this isn't the simple, fatality-free robbery he signed up for, but Neon actually intends to violently crash the steamer to crack its safe open, and will kill anyone who gets in his way, Kite has a change of heart and teams up with Vash to save everyone on board. It's basically Die Hard on a sand steamer, with just one guy, and a plucky child sidekick in this case, up against a large, heavily armed, occupying force of criminals, and it's awesome. While things still aren't as heavy as they would eventually get in the latter half of the series, these two episodes had easily the most excitement and genuine danger up to this point. Our villain straight up executes one of the steamer's crewmen, makes a big old puddle of blood and everything. Couple that with the fact that we also see Vash actually getting injured and fumbling with his usually superhumanly accurate gunmanship, and this adventure really highlights for the first time how even Vash has his limits and can't always save everyone. But he's as committed as ever to always try to save as many people as he can, even people who were just shooting at him, staunchly believing that there's always a chance for someone to make a better future as long as they're still alive. Kite, however, after losing his family so young, and living as a street urchin who's had to play dirty just to survive, is understandably frustrated by Vash's attitude. His own life struggles having taught him that being able to believe what Vash believes is a crazy luxury that most people just can't realistically afford. But his example ultimately does inspire Kite to indeed choose a better future, and play a part in saving the steamer that only he can play. Oh, and Meryl and Millie are around too, I guess. All in all, it's a thrilling couple of episodes with an awesome villain, some of the first strong hints at why Vash really does what he does and believes what he believes, and a one-off character who has a pretty satisfying arc, and in the dub also has one of the few voice actresses who can do a young boy voice I can actually stand listening to. No offense to the amazing Tara Strong or Kath Soucie, just keep most of their boy characters far, far away from me. Number 6. Episode 20, Flying Ship, and Episode 21, Out of Time. Yes, another unofficial two-parter. Vash has now battled the first few gung-ho guns, been officially labeled a human natural disaster after leveling another town and blasting a big-ass hole in one of the moons, and has even tried giving up and living a quiet life under a new identity for a time. Having finally decided he'll have to face those responsible for all the death and destruction lately, he returns to a place he used to call home to get prepared. Turns out, for a while, Vash lived with a community of people aboard a largely still intact Seeds ship that stayed afloat in the sky all these years. Ironically, our humanoid typhoon gets there by riding the winds of an actual typhoon. While Vash gets a warm welcome from the residents, Wolfwood, who tagged along, is treated with disdain and distrust for being an outsider from that uncivilized world below, full of greed, killing, and cruelty. While Wolfwood certainly knows better than most just how imperfect life on the surface can be, he tries to give these people a reality check that no matter what they think, they're living on borrowed time and will likely wind up living down there themselves one day. It's an interesting change from the Old West-style environments we normally see in this series, to one a bit more like how humanity lived before settling on this planet, and goes to show it's easy to cultivate an insular, holier-than-thou attitude towards certain people or issues going on when you're used to living in relative comfort at a nice safe distance from the reality of it all. Like one of my favorite Star Trek captains once said,
"Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise."
Unfortunately, Wolfwood is not the only one who followed Vash up here. Not one, not two, but 3 of the gung-ho guns are here to bring the ship crashing down and, of course, kill as many innocent civilians as possible in the process. Even with Vash's new and improved cybernetic arm, complete with an upgraded built-in gun, he and Wolfwood struggle like hell against a legion of creepy puppets, the Juggernaut with missile launcher boobs, and whatever this hockey-masked metal spinning top guy is. Yes, I know each of the gung-ho guns has a name, but most of them aren't particularly interesting enough as characters for me to care. The two-parter is action-packed and creative. It treats us to a rare look at one of the angelic alien entities that exist inside the energy plants, and it takes a pretty personally devastating toll on Vash's heart by the end. Even though we just met these people and only started properly getting to know like 2 or 3 of them, you still really feel Vash's sorrow at seeing all these people he lived with and loved slaughtered in a tragedy he feels he brought to this place, cemented by a heartbreaking final twist involving one of those creepy puppets. Oh, and Meryl and Millie are around too, I guess. This is also where we start to question just how trustworthy Wolfwood really is. He still seems to be an ally for the most part, since he's fighting side by side with Vash against these villains, but here and there he demonstrates a little too much familiarity with each of them that it feels all but certain he'll soon have his own role to play in Legato's plans against Vash. Number 5. Episode 23, Paradise. What do you know, Wolfwood turned out to have his own role to play in Legato's plans against Vash. He's paid an unexpected visit by Chapel, a gung-ho gun and the man who took him in as an orphan and trained him to become the sharpshooting churchman he is today.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Wolfwood has indeed known about knives and his flunkies for some time now, and has even been working for them to keep an eye on Vash and to make sure he doesn't die before their plans for him are complete. After all, Legato wants to torture Vash, not just outright murder him. It'd be kind of anticlimactic for him if one of the other goons wound up doing their job too well. However, Chapel claims the plan has changed and says the orphanage that Wolfwood runs will receive guaranteed financial security if he kills Vash. For a while, we wonder if he might really accept the deal. He and Vash are more at odds than ever right now, after Wolfwood summarily killed someone to save Vash's life in the previous episode. And even without their disagreements over killing in general, the fact that it was a child he gunned down, after dedicating his life to the protection of children above all, is weighing heavily on his conscience. He and the kids in his care can finally live in peace and security, and leave this whole life of struggle, violence, and moral compromise behind for good. All he has to do is make one more compromise and murder a good man he considers a friend. Ultimately, Wolfwood decides to try and be better than what his mentor and his past have made him, and has a badass standoff with Chapel, who of course has a cool giant cross weapon of his own. Chapel has had very little presence before now, but once again, Trigun's efficient ways of imparting just enough vital information just when and where we need it continues to be effective. One episode manages to be all we need to appreciate the history and dynamic between these two, and to feel a real sense of satisfaction when the student not only stands up to, but surpasses the teacher. You probably know what to expect whenever an episode shifts focus to a supporting character and delves more into their backstory than ever before, especially when it happens this late in a series. But the result here is lovingly remembered by many fans as the best episode for one of the show's best characters. The ending scene with Wolfwood in the church is so damn powerfully human, and leaves the audience with some mature and meaningful feels. Episode 23 is arguably Wolfwood's finest hour, and the most devastatingly dramatic episode in the series. Well, until episode 24. Number 4. Episode 24, Sin. When you get right down to it, almost every act of villainy committed by the Gung-Ho Guns, all the death and suffering they caused, was basically just to spite Vash. Legato and Knives revile the human race that Vash loves, and they know the most painful way to torture him is to casually toy with and destroy innocent people around him, actively mocking and tarnishing his beliefs about the value of human life. And it's in this episode where Legato enacts the final phase of his plan to push Vash's convictions to the breaking point and turn his moral code against him in the most mortifying of ways. As Vash is grieving for all the lives he's failed to save recently, Legato arrives to twist the knife more, taunting him as nihilistically and matter-of-factly as ever. Dude basically gaslights him, trying to argue that by refusing to kill the bad guys, Vash is really the one responsible for all the civilians and friends who have died. Yeah, no. You guys are still the ones actively killing people for the express purpose of fucking with him. There's a legitimate debate you could have about whether he should have just promptly killed the bad guys or not, how he could have saved more lives that way, but either way, they still started it. He wouldn't have to be agonizing about saving any of these lives if not for these assholes. But of course, Legato isn't doing this because he actually gives a shit about the argument. There is no wrong way for humans to die as far as he's concerned, as long as they suffer. No, he's really saying all this because he knows Vash is already thinking it on some level, and he exploits that inner turmoil to get him mentally and emotionally right where he wants him. Even Mid-Valley the Horn Freak, the final remaining Gung-Ho Gun besides Legato, kills himself after Vash gets the upper hand in the fight, denying Vash the chance to save even him. Just another part of this whole vindictive master plan to hammer in how hopelessly misguided Vash's way of life supposedly is. And when the time of their final confrontation comes, for all the sheer, terrifying magnitude of Legato's mind powers, for all the different ways he could physically attack Vash, he instead engineers the one-of-a-kind situation where he can truly gain the ultimate victory over the man, dying by Vash's own hand, forcing him to compromise his deeply held belief that he must never take a person's life, to choose between honoring the memory of Rem and all she stood for, and the lives of his last closest friends, Meryl and Millie.
It's alright, kill me. It's simple. All you need do is pull the trigger. Once you have killed me, this will all be over.
It is an absolutely twisted, nerve-wracking, and poignant climax to what many fans would argue was the real main conflict of the series, even if the final showdown with Knives was still to come afterwards. Beyond the fact that he just appeared on screen more regularly, this is why Legato tends to be remembered as the real main villain. As thoroughly as Knives tries and succeeds at hurting Vash on a personal level, you know he'd never go so far as to kill himself while proving his point. Legato comes closer to truly ruining Vash forever than anybody else, even Vash's own literal evil twin, ever could have, in this unforgettable wrecking ball of an episode. Number 3. Episode 17, Rem Savorum. Unlike the original manga and Trigun Stampede, which arguably give the audience too much information too fast at times, the 1998 anime initially left it pretty vague and speculative as to how humans came to live on this planet, where lost technology originally came from, Vash's childhood, what he really is, and who Rem and Knives were to him until this episode, which chronicles them all. I personally prefer the way this series presented the backstory. Waiting until more than halfway through the series allowed for an intriguing lead-up and a more impactful viewing experience when we finally got these answers. It's a vital part of the main plot, but it's also such a different feeling episode taking place in such a different setting and time that it also kind of feels like it could work as a self-contained short film or Twilight Zone episode. We follow a spaceship crew on a mission to find a new homeworld to settle on, with young Vash and Knives along for the ride. Back in their innocent days being raised by Rem, we see them learning about humanity for better and for worse, and the origins of their differing outlooks that continue to define their relationships with the human race and each other to this day. The conflict going on in the present day essentially amounts to these brothers still having the same disagreement about the spider and the butterfly.
That was the easiest way to stop him. You wanted to save the butterfly, right?
I didn't want to kill the spider, I wanted to save them both!
But unless the spider caught the butterfly, it would die of starvation anyway. You can't save both, don't you know that?
I can appreciate Trigun Stampede's more upfront, more hands-on, arguably more sympathetic approach to Knives as a villain, and how they elected to waste no time having him displaying some Magneto in X-Men Apocalypse level superpowers. But I'm personally more partial to the Loki or Skeksil or Hannibal Lecter kind of villain that Little Knives is in this version. Quiet, patient, calculating. He subtly manipulates his enemies into killing each other one by one rather than just axing them all by himself. Maybe because he's not physically ready to do that yet, maybe he just finds it more gratifying this way, or maybe both. But in any case, it makes a very creepy impression with very little needing to be shown. I love how much this episode feels like a horror flick at times, made all the more unsettling by its ambiguity. While Knives definitely did something to influence these people, it's left to our imagination whether he controlled any of them with his mindfuck powers or if he just cleverly manipulated them with talk. And either way, it's equally ambiguous just how much pushing they actually needed from him before they'd go mad and turn on each other like this. We know just enough about what was going on with each of them to know that Knives probably didn't need to make them act on any emotions that weren't already there. It's kind of fun to speculate about, like when you're rewatching John Carpenter's The Thing and trying to deduce who was or wasn't infected by the alien and when. This episode is our first proper introduction to the story's big bad, responsible for the gung-ho guns and the angel arm weapon that we saw obliterating a whole city in the episode just before this one. And this is how diabolical he could already be when he was just a kid, so when the next episode returns us to the present-day story, we have a whole new appreciation for just how dangerous things really are. It's also our first proper introduction to Rem, as she actually was when she was still alive, rather than the fantasy version that adult Vash talks to sometimes. And we get a better understanding of how important she was in his life and why he so tirelessly tries to practice what she taught him about life, morality, and hope. And while it's easy to see how Vash could put her on such a pedestal, we also see her in brief moments of vulnerability or doubt, reminding us that even she was always a flawed, normal person just doing the best she could, and that maybe Vash could do well to remember that fact more often. Episode 17 is emotional, scary, thought-provoking, provides some game-changing answers to a lot of questions while raising tantalizing new ones, and there's just no other episode in the series quite like it. Number 2. Episode 5, Hard Puncher. Say, remember when Trigun was fun? When it had that really endearing balance of drama and comedy? Well, this episode embodies that quintessential Trigun charm so perfectly that I could have easily placed it at number 1, and maybe I would on a different day waking up on a different side of the bed. Vash, in his usual quirky Vash way, neutralizes yet another batch of thugs who were after the bounty on his head. But unlike the previous episodes where that would have been the end of his problem for the day, the initially friendly townspeople are soon holding him at gunpoint as well. The plant they depend on for survival is breaking down, and the $60 billion double-dollar reward for catching Vash the Stampede may be their last hope to get it repaired. What follows is a delightfully chaotic and humorous chase through town that's just begging for the Benny Hill theme music. The debut of the other most memorable non-gung-ho gun villains in the series, the Nebraska family, complete with Steve Bloom doing one of his more cartoony voices.
Alright, who's the idiot that parked this car here? Are you trying to make my son trip or what? You know what, Vash? You're nothing but a damn hypocrite!
And finally, some hella rewarding payoffs for elements that the show wisely took its time leading up to in this episode. Up to this point in the show, Vash always saved the day in ways that were improbable, but maybe not impossible for a hapless man-child who just had a lot of really good luck and methods that were just crazy enough to work. But this story finally removes any doubt that the guy has genuinely superhuman abilities, and that his silly, clueless demeanor is, and has always been, largely a mask for a man of far more serious depth and conscience. There's something really fitting and unexpectedly satisfying about the moment Meryl finally admits to herself that the clown she and Millie keep running into really is the legendary outlaw they've been looking for. I always really liked how underplayed and genuine it is after her frequent denial of the idea had been played mainly for laughs until now.
That droopy-eyed, cocky, upside-down-haired women-chasing lunatic who's nuts for donuts and gorges them like a starved hog in heat. You honestly think it's him? Listen, we're looking for a horrible fiend with a price on his head, not an obnoxious idiot like that man.
You know what? I have been going through a lot of hell since I met the two of you.
We are the ones that are in hell, you idiot! Ugh.
The straight-up coolest bit of payoff in this episode, however, is of course the absolute showstopper of a scene where for the first time in the anime, we see Vash the Stampede draw his gun and fire. The fact that they held off on showing what Vash can really do when he gets serious enough to shoot made the moment all the more well-earned and badass to behold than if it had happened in the very first episode. The fact that he takes down a gigantic cyborg with such speed, precision, and grace proves to the insurance girls, the townspeople, and the audience once and for all that while Vash's reputation as a bloodthirsty monster has been greatly exaggerated, his prowess as a gunfighter definitely has not. Hard Puncher is not necessarily remembered by fans as the episode where everything changed, but it is the episode that many remember fondly for cementing what Trigun's identity was, where so many aspects of the show's special appeal were on full, glorious display for the first time. Funny, exciting, and full of character, nothing much else to say except that my feelings for this episode are made of
Love and peace! Love and peace! Love and peace! Love and peace!
Number 1. Episode 12, Diablo. This is the episode where everything changed. It's the first appearance of Legato and the beginning of Trigun's shift into significantly darker, more complex territory. Sure, the lighter-hearted first half of the series still had plenty of genuine danger, sincere dramatic moments, and even actual bloodshed and death on occasion, like in the Sandsteamer two-parter. But if you don't already feel that this episode is going to be different just from the atmosphere of the opening scene, there's really no mistaking it after the chilling first meeting between Vash and Legato. Symbolizing the show's overall tone shift from this point forward, Legato's entrance stops what was a moment of smiley, funny antics dead in its tracks. This ominous stranger's presence alone visibly frightening Vash more than we ever imagined our hero could be. Even knowing all the other great material still to come, this scene alone remains one of the highlights of the series for me. It's 3 minutes of Legato effortlessly conveying what a next-level enemy he is, with far more twisted and malicious goals than anybody we've seen Vash face yet. And he barely even has to do anything. His unnerving theme music, the enigmatic, confident way he telepathically speaks to Vash, and a single, tiny demonstration of what he could do with his mental powers at any time, and this new character has Vash and the audience totally petrified.
Your reaction was better than I'd hoped. You're fun. And to think I could kill every man, woman, and child here in the blink of an eye if I wanted to. The power of death is intoxicating.
The action portion of this episode is a real highlight of the show too, one of the very few that takes place at night, and I love how much the color palette complements the grittier tone. Lots of rough, hellish browns, reds, and oranges, with harsh, intimidating shadows right out of a Batman comic. The first gung-ho gun to hunt Vash, Monev the Gale, is probably my favorite after Legato, and I guess technically Wolfwood. Not only is it cute how his name is Venom spelled backwards, and they also clearly designed him to look a bit like the Spidey villain, but with kick-ass Gatling guns added, but he's also slightly more interesting than a lot of Legato's other goons because he's apparently the only involuntary member who's only doing this to earn his freedom. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean he cares any more than the others do about innocent lives getting caught in the crossfire, as he commits the first act of cold-blooded mass murder in the series. And our hero's response? Well, Hard Puncher showed us what happens when Vash gets serious, but Diablo shows us what happens when the humanoid typhoon gets pissed. This is the closest we've ever seen Vash come to willfully taking a life with no coercion whatsoever from another party, and it's legit scary. At the same time, though, the fact that it was compassionate, righteous outrage at seeing innocent people slaughtered that drove him to that point, and it takes nothing less than truly heinous deeds like that to bring out his dark side, goes to show what a genuinely good-hearted person Vash still is. And this was only the first of many events that would push his principles and abilities relentlessly for the rest of the series. Again, all because Vash's brother is a dick. Not that we're supposed to know that yet in this episode. Here, Knives is just a briefly glimpsed, unnamed, dark, and ominous figure from Vash's still mysterious past that the events here leave us all the more curious and apprehensive to learn more about. Other episodes on this list are arguably stronger in their own ways, and like I said, on another day I might put Hard Puncher at number 1 instead, but Diablo just stands out in so many cool ways, and has always just been so damn rewatchable for me. A terrifying new villain heralding an exciting new direction for the show, one of the most kick-ass and visually memorable fights, our lovable hero struggling with his toughest physical and moral challenge yet, while demonstrating why all wise men fear the anger of a gentleman. Diablo, my number 1 favorite episode of Trigun. I'm the Adorkable RJ. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe and stuff if you are so inclined, and until next time, love and peace, and glory to fankind.